One day after marrying my only son, my daughter-in-law knocked on my door with a notary. "Pack your bags. We have a nursing home waiting for you." I replied, "All right, but first look at this DNA test I found in your car." Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this and comment the city you're watching from. My name is Kathy, and I'm 66 years old. Yesterday was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life, watching my only son Paul marry the woman he loves. Instead, it became the beginning of the most humiliating experience I've ever endured. The morning after the wedding, I was still cleaning up the remnants of the reception in my backyard when I heard the doorbell ring. Through the peephole, I saw Mia, my new daughter-in-law, standing on my porch with a man in a dark suit carrying a briefcase. Something about their posture made my stomach clench with dread. I opened the door with a smile, still trying to hold on to the joy from yesterday. "Mia, sweetheart. I was just finishing the cleanup. Would you like some coffee? I saved some of the leftover cake for you and Paul." She didn't smile back. Her expression was cold, almost clinical. "No, thank you, Kathy. We need to talk." She gestured to the man beside her. "This is Mr. Henderson, a notary public." My hands started trembling, though I didn't understand why yet. "A notary? What's this about?" Mia stepped inside without being invited, and Mr. Henderson followed. They stood in my living room, the same room where I'd rocked Paul to sleep as a baby, where I'd helped him with homework, where we'd celebrated every Christmas morning together. "Kathy," Mia began, her voice eerily calm, "Paul and I have discussed this extensively, and we've made a decision about your living situation." The words hit me like a physical blow. "My living situation? What do you mean?" She reached into her purse and pulled out a stack of papers. "We found you a lovely assisted living facility about 2 hours away. Sunset Manor. It has excellent reviews and all the amenities an older person could need." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Assisted living? But I don't need assisted living. I live here. This is my home." "Was your home," Mia corrected, emphasizing the past tense. "Paul explained to me how difficult it's been for you to maintain this large house. The yard work, the repairs, the financial burden. It's too much for someone your age." I looked around my living room, seeing it through new eyes. Yes, it was a large house, 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a big kitchen where I'd cooked thousands of meals for Paul. But it wasn't a burden. It was my sanctuary, filled with 37 years of memory since my husband died when Paul was just 12. "Paul said this?" My voice came out as barely a whisper. "Of course he did. We're married now, Kathy. We're a unit. And frankly, having you here would complicate our plans to start our own family." She placed her hand on her still flat stomach. "We need space, privacy. I'm sure you understand." Mr. Henderson cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Mrs. Patterson, I have the necessary paperwork here for the transfer of arrangements. If you could just sign here and here, transfer of arrangements?" I repeated, my mind struggling to process what was happening. "Wait, where is Paul? Why isn't he here explaining this himself?" Mia's eyes flashed with something that looked almost like satisfaction. "Paul is at work, earning money to support his new family. He asked me to handle this because, well, he thought it might be easier coming from another woman. He knows how emotional you can get." "Emotional?" I'd raised Paul single-handedly after his father died of a heart attack at 42. I'd worked 2 jobs to keep this house, to pay for Paul's college, to make sure he never went without anything he needed. I'd been strong when strength was all I had left. "I need to talk to Paul," I said, reaching for my phone. "He's in meetings all day," Mia said quickly, moving to block my path to the kitchen where my landline was. "Look, Kathy, I know this is hard, but it's what's best for everyone. You'll make new friends at Sunset Manor. There are activities, organized meals, medical care on site. It's really quite nice." I stared at the papers Mr. Henderson was holding, my vision blurring with tears I refused to let fall. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. "When?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "This weekend," Mia replied briskly. "I've already spoken with the facility. They have a lovely room available, and the sooner we get you settled, the sooner you can start adjusting to your new life." "This weekend?" 5 days from now. I'd be removed from the home where I'd spent more than half my life, where every corner held a memory of Paul growing up, where my husband's presence still lingered in the woodwork he'd installed and the garden he'd planted. "The house," I began, "will be handled by Paul and me," Mia finished. "Don't worry about the details. We'll take care of everything." I looked at Mr. Henderson, hoping to find some ally, some voice of reason. He avoided my eyes, clearly uncomfortable with the situation but apparently bound by professional obligation. "I don't want to sign this," I said finally, finding a small reserve of strength. Mia's mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw something cold and calculating underneath. Kathy, let's not make this more difficult than it needs to be. Paul has already signed the necessary papers. As your next of kin and financial power of attorney, he has the legal right to make these decisions for your welfare. Power of attorney? When had Paul gotten power of attorney? The room started spinning as I realized how thoroughly I'd been outmaneuvered. I need some time to think, I said, gripping the back of a chair to steady myself. Of course, Mia said, her false sweetness returning. You have until Friday to pack what you'd like to take with you. One suitcase should be sufficient. The facility provides most necessities. One suitcase. For a lifetime of possessions, memories, keepsakes. After they left, I sank into my husband's old recliner and finally let the tears come. Deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to tear something fundamental inside me. This was what my life had come to, being discarded by the son I'd devoted everything to, treated like an inconvenience by a woman who'd known me for less than 2 years. But as I sat there, surrounded by the evidence of my life, something else began to stir beneath the hurt and humiliation. A memory of my husband's voice, telling me on his deathbed to be strong for Paul, to never give up fighting for what mattered. I'd been fighting my whole life. I wasn't about to stop now. The next morning, I would discover something that would change everything. Something that would show me exactly who Mia really was, and what she was really after. But that night, all I could do was grieve for the son I thought I knew and prepare for the battle I never saw coming. I barely slept that night. Every creak of the house seemed to mock me, reminding me that my time here was numbered. I kept thinking about Paul, trying to understand how the little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms could have grown into a man who would abandon his mother so callously. By dawn, I'd made a decision. I would pack, but I would also fight. I would try one more time to reach my son, to make him understand what he was doing. I started in the guest room, the one Paul had used until he moved out at 25. As I folded his old t-shirts and collected childhood mementos, memories flooded back. Paul at 8, bringing me breakfast in bed on Mother's Day, burnt toast and watery orange juice that tasted like heaven because he'd made it with love. Paul at 16, awkward and gangly, asking me to teach him to dance before his first formal. Paul at 22, graduating college with the degree I'd sacrificed everything to help him earn. Where had that boy gone? When had he become someone who could look at me and see only a burden? Around 10 o'clock, I heard a car door slam outside. My heart leaped. Maybe Paul had come to his senses, maybe he was here to call off this insanity. I rushed to the front window and saw Mia's silver sedan parked in my driveway. But she wasn't getting out. She was sitting in the driver's seat, talking animatedly on her phone. I couldn't make out the words, but her body language was agitated, almost frantic. She kept gesturing with her free hand, and even from a distance, I could see the tension in her shoulders. After about 10 minutes, she ended the call and sat there for a moment, her head in her hands. Then she got out of the car, grabbed a small bag from the passenger seat, and walked to my front door. I opened it before she could knock. Kathy, she said, forcing another one of those artificial smiles. I just wanted to check on you, see how the packing is going. I'm managing, I replied stiffly. Is Paul with you? He's still at work. Very busy with a new project. She brushed past me into the house. Mind if I use your bathroom? The drive over here was longer than I expected. I nodded, watching her head down the hallway. Something felt off about her behavior, more off than usual. She seemed nervous, distracted, not at all like the composed woman who delivered my eviction notice yesterday. While she was in the bathroom, I found myself looking out at her car again. The passenger door was slightly ajar, and I could see papers scattered across the seat. Without really thinking about what I was doing, I walked outside. I told myself I was just closing her car door, being neighborly. But as I approached the vehicle, something white and official-looking caught my eye among the papers. It was sticking out from under a manila envelope, just visible enough for me to see a logo I recognized. GeneTech Laboratories. My breath caught in my throat. Why would Mia have something from a genetics lab? A horrible suspicion began to form in my mind, one so awful I almost dismissed it immediately. I glanced back at the house. I could hear water running in the bathroom. Without allowing myself to think about the ethics of what I was doing, I reached into the car and carefully pulled out the document. It was a DNA test result, dated just 3 days ago. My hands shook as I read the header, Paternity Analysis Report. The test subject was listed as female, 28 years old. The alleged father was listed as Paul Patterson. The result, in bold letters that seemed to burn into my retinas, was clear: probability of paternity, 0%. I nearly dropped the paper. 0%. The child Mia claimed to be carrying wasn't Paul's, but wait, that didn't make sense. If this was about her current pregnancy, why would they already have done a paternity test? She was barely showing. Maybe 2 months along at most. I looked more carefully at the document, and my blood turned to ice. The date of sample collection was 6 months ago. This wasn't about a current pregnancy at all. Kathy? What are you doing? Mia's voice made me jump. She was standing in my doorway, and the friendly mask had completely dropped from her face. Her eyes were cold, calculating, and definitely dangerous. I was just closing your car door, I said, trying to keep my voice steady while sliding the paper behind my back. With your hand inside my car? She began walking toward me, and I noticed. She was no longer wearing the comfortable shoes she'd had on when she arrived. She'd changed into heels, the kind that would leave marks. Mia, give me the paper, Kathy. There was no point in pretending anymore. I brought the DNA test results forward, my hands trembling but my voice surprisingly strong. Who is the real father? For a moment, we stared at each other across the driveway. Then Mia began to laugh, a sound so cold and heartless it made my skin crawl. You really want to know? She asked, stepping closer. Fine. His name is Marcus, and he's married with 3 kids. Very married. Very unavailable. Very unwilling to leave his wife for a pregnant girlfriend. The pieces began falling into place. With sickening clarity. So you found Paul. I found Paul, she confirmed, her smile now genuinely amused. Sweet, lonely Paul who was so grateful to find someone who loved him. It was almost too easy. He does love you, I said, though the words felt like ash in my mouth. I'm sure he thinks he does. And I'm sure he'll keep thinking that right up. Until I get tired of playing house with him. She shrugged as if we were discussing the weather. Don't look so shocked, Kathy. Men like Paul are a dime a dozen, decent enough, stable income, desperate to be needed. Perfect for women in my situation. Your situation? I could barely get the words out. Pregnant with another man's child. And in need of a father figure. Paul was practically gift-wrapped for me. She studied my face with clinical interest. The real question is, what are you going to do with this information? I clutched the paper tighter. I'm going to tell him. No, Mia said calmly, you're not. He's my son. He deserves to know the truth. Your son, she repeated mockingly, chose me over you. He signed those papers giving himself power of attorney over your affairs. He agreed to put you in that nursing home. Face it, Kathy, you don't matter to him anymore. Each word was like a physical blow, but I forced myself to stand straighter. He'll listen to me when he sees this. Will he? Mia pulled out her phone and began scrolling through what looked like text messages. Let's see, here's the one where I told him you'd been acting strange lately, forgetting things. And this one where I mentioned you'd been going through my personal belongings. Oh, and this gem where I expressed concern that you might be developing dementia. My knees nearly gave out. You've been planning this. Planning what? Caring for an elderly woman who's clearly losing her grip on reality? Who's become paranoid and invasive? Who started making wild accusations about her loving daughter-in-law? She smiled that cold, terrible smile again. By the time you tell Paul about this supposed DNA test, which, by the way, could easily be fabricated by someone with deteriorating mental faculties, he'll already be convinced you need professional care. The trap was so perfect, so thoroughly constructed, that I felt a grudging admiration for her cunning even as I reeled from the implications. Besides, Mia continued, putting her phone away, you'll be safely tucked away at Sunset Manor by this weekend. And even if you did somehow convince Paul to listen to your ramblings about DNA tests, what would it matter? We're already married. The paperwork is filed. And I'm having his baby, or so he believes. She reached out and, with surprising gentleness, took the DNA test from my numb fingers. You know what your problem is, Kathy? You never learned when to quit. Some battles can't be won, especially by old women who've outlived their usefulness. She walked back to her car, leaving me standing in my own driveway, feeling more alone and powerless than I ever had in my life. As she drove away, I realized that everything, the marriage, the pregnancy announcement, the sudden decision to move me out, had been orchestrated from the beginning, but Mia had made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated what a mother would do to protect her child, even when that child no longer wanted protection. And she'd shown me her hand too early. I still had 4 days before they shipped me off to Sunset Manor. 4 days to figure out how to save my son from the woman who was destroying his life. The war wasn't over. It had barely begun. After Mia drove away with that DNA test, I stood in my driveway for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. My neighbors were starting their daily routines, Mrs. Chen watering her flowers, the Johnsons loading their kids into the minivan for school. Normal people living normal lives, completely unaware that my world had just imploded. I walked back inside on unsteady legs and sank into my kitchen chair. The same chair where I'd helped Paul with algebra homework, where we'd eaten countless breakfasts together, where I'd sat alone so many nights after his father died, wondering how I'd raise a boy into a man by myself. Now I knew I'd failed. Not in the way Mia claimed. Paul wasn't a bad person. But I'd raised him to be trusting, to see the good in people, to believe that love conquered all. Those weren't character flaws in a normal world, but they made him perfect prey for someone like her. I had to think clearly now. Emotion wouldn't save Paul, only strategy would. First, I needed to understand exactly what I was up against. I pulled out my laptop, the one Paul had bought me 2 Christmases ago, insisting I needed to get with the times. He'd been so patient, teaching me to use it, laughing good-naturedly when I accidentally deleted files or couldn't figure out how to attach photos to emails. I typed Mia Sullivan background check into the search engine and waited. Nothing immediately suspicious came up, just a Facebook profile with carefully curated photos of her and Paul looking blissfully happy, a LinkedIn page showing sporadic employment at various marketing firms, but something nagged at me. In all the time Paul had been dating her, nearly 2 years now, I'd never met any of her family. She'd always had excuses. Her parents lived overseas. Her siblings were estranged. She was an only child whose parents had died young. The stories changed depending on the conversation. I tried different combinations: Mia Sullivan fraud, Mia Sullivan marriage, Mia Sullivan criminal record. Still nothing. Then I remembered something. At the engagement party 6 months ago, I'd overheard Mia on the phone in the bathroom. She'd been talking to someone about the Denver situation and how she couldn't go back there until things cooled down. At the time, I'd thought she was referring to a job or maybe family drama. Now it took on a much more sinister meaning. I added Denver to my search terms and hit enter. The third result down made my heart stop. Local woman disappears after marriage fraud allegations. The article was from a Denver newspaper, dated 8 months ago. It featured a photo of a woman who looked remarkably similar to Mia, but with darker hair and different makeup. The name given was Maria Santos. According to the article, Maria Santos had married a widowed businessman named Robert Chen, claiming to be pregnant with his child. 6 months into the marriage, Chen discovered that not only was the child not his, but Maria had been systematically draining his accounts and had bigamous marriages in at least 2 other states. When confronted, she disappeared overnight, leaving behind only debts and a devastated family. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely scroll down to read the rest. The article mentioned that Maria Santos was believed to be an alias, and that authorities suspected she was part of a larger network of con artists who targeted lonely, recently widowed or divorced men. I stared at the photo for a long time. The bone structure was identical to Mia's. The eyes were the same pale green. Even the way she tilted her head was familiar. But her hair was black instead of blonde, and she wore glasses that changed the shape of her face. I printed the article, then searched for more information about Robert Chen. I found an obituary dated 3 months after the Denver article. Robert Chen, age 54, had died of an apparent heart attack. The obituary mentioned his brief marriage to Maria Santos and asked that donations be made to a suicide prevention charity in lieu of flowers. My blood ran cold. Had his death really been natural, or had the stress and betrayal been too much for him to bear? I kept searching, using the name Maria Santos now instead of Mia Sullivan. More articles appeared, painting a picture of a woman who left destruction in her wake. A marriage in Phoenix that ended when Maria was caught stealing her husband's prescription medications to sell. Another in Sacramento where she'd convinced her elderly husband to change his will before disappearing with his antique jewelry collection. Each story was similar: vulnerable men, usually older, usually recently bereaved. Quick courtships, rushed marriages, pregnancy claims that were later revealed to be false. And always, she vanished before facing consequences, leaving her victims too humiliated and broken to pursue justice. The pattern was clear, but I still needed proof that Maria Santos and Mia Sullivan were the same person. I needed something concrete that even love-struck Paul couldn't dismiss. That's when I remembered Mia's phone call in the driveway. She'd been agitated, almost panicked. What if someone from her past was catching up with her? What if she was running out of time here too? I picked up my phone and dialed directory assistance. I need the number for the Denver Police Department, I said when the operator answered. 20 minutes later, I was talking to Detective Sarah Martinez, who had worked the Maria Santos case. Mrs. Patterson, she said after I'd explained the situation. I have to tell you, we've been looking for this woman for months. If you really think you found her, you need to be very careful. She's dangerous, not necessarily violent, but she's destroyed lives. The psychological damage she causes is devastating. What can I do? I asked. My son is married to her. He thinks she's carrying his child. First, don't confront her directly. Women like this are masters of manipulation, and if she feels cornered, she'll escalate. Do you have any way to get fingerprints or DNA evidence? I thought about it. She's been in my house. She used my bathroom yesterday. That's good. Can you secure anything she might have touched? A glass, a doorknob, anything? I rushed to the bathroom she'd used. The towel was still hanging where she'd left it, and there was a water glass on the counter that I remembered offering her when she'd first arrived. With shaking hands, I carefully placed both items in plastic bags. Detective Martinez, I said when I called her back, I have some items. But even if you can prove she's Maria Santos, what happens to my son? He's already married to her legally. That depends on whether we can prove fraud in the marriage itself. If she lied about her identity, if she's already married to someone else, if she misrepresented herself in any material way, the marriage could be annulled. Hope flickered in my chest for the first time in days. How long would it take to process fingerprints? If you can get them to us, we could have results in 24 to 48 hours. But Mrs. Patterson, you need to understand, even if we identify her, she might run before we can arrest her. And if she does, she'll take Paul's money and disappear, I finished. Exactly. And your son will be left with nothing but debt and heartbreak. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen staring at the plastic bags containing what might be the evidence to save Paul's life. But Detective Martinez was right, Mia would run the moment she sensed danger. I had to be smarter than that. I needed a plan that would expose her completely, in front of witnesses. In a way that would make it impossible for her to manipulate the situation or blame me for fabricating evidence, and I needed to do it before this weekend, before they shipped me off to Sunset Manor and left Paul completely defenseless. I looked at the calendar on my refrigerator. Today was Tuesday. Mia had said they'd move me out on Saturday. That gave me 4 days. 4 days to take down a professional con artist and save my son from making the biggest mistake of his life. I'd spent 43 years protecting Paul, first from the harsh realities of losing his father so young, then from financial hardship, then from the disappointments and heartbreaks of growing up. I'd failed to protect him from Mia's manipulation, but I wouldn't fail to protect him from her ultimate betrayal. She thought she was dealing with a confused old woman who could be easily discarded. She was about to learn just how wrong she was. The real war was about to begin, and this time, I wasn't fighting to keep my house or avoid the nursing home. I was fighting for my son's life, his future, and his ability to trust and love again after she was done destroying him. Mia Sullivan, or Maria Santos, or whatever her real name was, had picked the wrong family to destroy. Wednesday morning brought rain, the kind of steady, gray drizzle that seemed to match my mood as I waited for Detective Martinez to call with the fingerprint results. I'd barely slept, my mind racing through possible scenarios, each one more terrifying than the last. At 9:30, my phone finally rang. Mrs. Patterson, we have a match, Detective Martinez said without preamble. Your daughter-in-law is definitely Maria Santos. But it's worse than we thought. I gripped the phone tighter. How much worse? We ran her prints through the national database. She has at least 6 documented identities across 5 states, dating back 8 years. The marriage fraud is just the tip of the iceberg. There's also identity theft, insurance fraud, prescription drug trafficking, and we suspect she's been involved in at least 3 suspicious deaths. The room started spinning. Deaths? Elderly spouses who died shortly after changing their wills in her favor. All appeared to be natural causes, but the pattern is concerning. Mrs. Patterson, your son is in serious danger. Not just financially, physically. I had to sit down before my legs gave out completely. What do I do? We're issuing a warrant for her arrest, but that could take a few hours to process. In the meantime, you need to keep your son away from her without alerting her to what's happening. Can you do that? I can try. But detective, there's something else. She's convinced Paul I'm developing dementia. She's been setting up this narrative for weeks, maybe months. If I try to tell him about this, he'll think it's just more evidence of my mental decline. There was a pause. That's actually a common tactic. She isolates her victims from anyone who might see through her facade. Do you have any mutual friends, anyone Paul trusts who might be willing to help? I thought about it. Paul's best friend Marcus lived across town, but I hadn't spoken to him in months. Paul's boss at the accounting firm had always been kind to me, but would he believe such an outlandish story? Then I remembered something. Paul's been having doubts. What kind of doubts? Last week, before the wedding, he called me. He was worried about some inconsistencies in Mia's stories. Little things that didn't add up. He asked if I thought people could really change their entire personality when they fell in love. That's good. That means part of him is already questioning things. We need to build on that doubt without making it seem like you're attacking her directly. After Detective Martinez hung up, I sat in my kitchen trying to formulate a plan. I needed to reach Paul, but not in a way that would trigger Mia's carefully constructed narrative about my mental state. Then I remembered Paul's childhood hiding spot, when he was young, maybe 7 or 8, he discovered that one of the loose floorboards in his closet could be lifted up, creating a small storage space. He used to hide his most precious possessions there, rare baseball cards, birthday money, love notes from his first girlfriend. Even after he moved out, I'd occasionally find him checking that old hiding spot when he visited, like he was reconnecting with his younger self. I went upstairs to his old room and knelt by the closet. The floorboard was still loose after all these years. Inside the small cavity, I placed copies of everything I'd found, the Denver newspaper articles, printouts of the other Maria Santos cases, Detective Martinez's card, and a letter explaining everything I knew. Then I called Paul's office. "Hi, this is Kathy Patterson, Paul's mother," I said when his secretary answered. "I was wondering if I could schedule lunch with him today. I have some things of his father's that I'd like him to have before I move this weekend." "Oh, of course, Mrs. Patterson. Let me check his schedule." I could hear typing in the background. "He has a free hour at 12:30. Would that work?" "Perfect. Could you tell him to meet me at the house? I'd like him to go through his old room, see if there's anything else he'd like to keep." It wasn't entirely a lie. I did want Paul to go through his old room, just not for the reasons his secretary thought. At 12:25, I heard Paul's car in the driveway. I met him at the door, and for a moment, seeing his familiar face, I almost broke down. This was my little boy, the one I'd rocked through fevers and nightmares, the one who used to bring me dandelions and call them flowers. How had Mia managed to turn him against me so completely? "Hi, Mom," he said, and his voice was strained. "Mia said you wanted to see me?" "I called your office directly," I said carefully. "I didn't talk to Mia." Something flickered across his face, confusion, maybe even relief. "Oh," she said, "never mind. What did you want to show me?" I led him upstairs to his old room. "I've been going through things for the move, and I found some of your father's belongings mixed in with your old stuff. I thought you might want to look through everything, see what's worth keeping." Paul nodded, but I could see the discomfort in his posture. Being here was bringing back memories, and I could tell he was struggling with the disconnect between those memories and what Mia had told him about our relationship. "Mom," he said suddenly, "about the assisted living arrangement, what about it?" "It's just, I keep thinking about Dad, about how he always said this house was your sanctuary. Are you sure you want to leave?" My heart leaped. This was the opening I'd hoped for. "What do you think, Paul? Do I seem like someone who needs assisted living?" He really looked at me for the first time in months. "No," he admitted quietly. "You don't. But Mia said you'd been acting confused, forgetting things." "What kinds of things?" "She said you'd been asking the same questions repeatedly, that you'd gotten lost driving to the grocery store last week, that you'd left the stove on overnight." None of those things had happened. I'd been sharper than ever lately, probably because I'd been so worried about the changes in Paul's behavior. "Paul," I said gently, "when have you personally witnessed me doing any of those things?" He frowned, clearly trying to remember. Well, Mia told me about them. She was worried about you. But you haven't seen them yourself?" "No, but..." He trailed off, and I could see the doubt creeping into his expression. "Why don't you look through your old closet?" I suggested. "See if there's anything in there you'd like to take with you." He opened the closet door and began sorting through old clothes and books. I watched from the doorway, my heart pounding as he got closer to the loose floorboard. "This old hiding spot," he said with a small laugh, kneeling down. "I can't believe you never found it." "Oh, I knew about it from the beginning," I said. "I just never let on." He looked up at me with surprise, then lifted the floorboard. His expression changed when he saw the manila envelope underneath. "What's this?" "Something I think you need to see." He pulled out the envelope and opened it. I watched his face as he read, saw the exact moment when disbelief turned to shock, then to something that looked like physical pain. "This can't be right," he whispered, holding up the Denver newspaper article. "This looks like Mia, but the name..." "Keep reading." He went through each document, his hands shaking more with each page. When he got to Detective Martinez's card, he looked up at me with eyes that were bright with unshed tears. "How long have you known?" "I found the DNA test in her car yesterday. I've been researching since then." "The DNA test?" His voice was hollowed out. I sat down beside him on the floor of his childhood bedroom. "Paul, she's not pregnant with your baby. The test shows 0% probability that you're the father." He stared at the papers scattered around us like pieces of a puzzle that finally made a horrible picture. "But we're married. We just got married. Under false pretenses. If she lied about who she is, if she's already married to someone else, the marriage can be annulled." "Already married?" He looked through the papers again, finding the reference to her bigamous marriages. Oh God, what have I done?" You fell in love with someone who presented herself as something she wasn't. That's not your fault, Paul. But I chose her over you, he said, and now the tears were falling freely. I believed her when she said you were losing your mind. I signed those papers to put you in a nursing home. What kind of son does that? A son who was being manipulated by a professional con artist, I said firmly. Paul, she's done this before, multiple times. She's an expert at making people doubt themselves and the people who love them. He buried his face in his hands. I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. We don't have time for apologies right now, I said, though my heart was breaking for him. The police are issuing a warrant for her arrest, but she might run before they can serve it. We need to figure out how to handle this. Where is she now? I don't know. She was supposed to help me pack today, but she never showed up. Paul pulled out his phone and dialed. I could hear it go straight to voicemail. Mia, it's me. Call me back as soon as you get this. I need to talk to you about something important. He hung up and looked at me. What if she's already gone? Then at least you're safe, I said. But Paul, if she is still here, if she comes back, you can't let her know that you know. Not until the police can arrest her. I don't think I can pretend everything's normal, he said, gesturing to the evidence around us. You have to try. Because if she realizes we're onto her, there's no telling what she might do. Paul's phone buzzed with a text message. He looked at it and his face went pale. What does it say? She says she's at the doctor's office, getting the baby checked. She wants me to meet her there in an hour to hear the heartbeat. The cruel irony of it, using a fake pregnancy to manipulate him even as her world was closing in. Paul, you can't go. But if I don't show up, she'll know something's wrong. Then we call Detective Martinez right now and tell her where Mia will be. As Paul dialed the police, I looked around his childhood room one more time. In a few hours, this nightmare would be over. Mia would be in custody, Paul would be free, and maybe we could start rebuilding the relationship she'd tried so hard to destroy, but I had a terrible feeling that Mia wasn't going down without a fight, and that the worst was yet to come. Detective Martinez arrived at my house within 20 minutes, accompanied by 2 uniformed officers. Paul sat at my kitchen table, still clutching the evidence we'd found, his face pale and drawn. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past hour. Mr. Patterson, Detective Martinez said gently, I know this is overwhelming, but I need you to understand how dangerous this woman is. We have reason to believe she's been involved in at least 3 suspicious deaths. Paul's hands started shaking again. Deaths? What kind of deaths? Elderly spouses who died shortly after being manipulated into changing their wills. The deaths appeared natural, but the pattern suggests she may have been hastening the process. I felt my blood turn to ice. You think she was planning to kill Paul? Possibly. Or you, Mrs. Patterson. Elder abuse and murder is unfortunately common in these types of cons, especially when large amounts of money are involved. Paul looked at me with horror. Mom, I gave her power of attorney over your finances when I signed those nursing home papers. She has access to everything. What? I stared at him. Paul, what exactly did you sign? I thought it was just authorization for the nursing home, he said, his voice cracking. But now I'm remembering, there were a lot of papers. Mia said they were all standard, that I didn't need to read through every page. Detective Martinez exchanged a look with one of the officers. Mr. Patterson, we need to know exactly what documents you signed and when. Paul pulled out his phone with shaking fingers. I took pictures of everything. Mia suggested it, said it was good to have records. The bitter irony wasn't lost on any of us, she'd convinced him to document his own manipulation. As Paul scrolled through the photos on his phone, Detective Martinez studied each document. Her expression grew grimmer with each page. Mr. Patterson, you didn't just authorize nursing home care. You signed over full financial power of attorney, medical decision-making authority, and… She paused, reading more carefully. Property transfer documents. If something happened to you, everything would go directly to your spouse, bypassing normal probate procedures. The room was dead silent except for the sound of rain against the windows. Paul looked like he might be sick. She was going to kill us both, I said quietly. She was going to put me in that nursing home, drain my accounts, then find a way to make Paul's death look accidental. That's certainly consistent with her previous pattern, Detective Martinez confirmed. The question now is whether she's realized we're closing in. As if summoned by our conversation, Paul's phone rang. We all stared at it as Mia's name appeared on the screen. Answer it, Detective Martinez instructed. Act completely normal. Ask her where she is, but don't push too hard. Paul's hand trembled as he accepted the call. Hi, honey. Paul. Mia's voice was bright and cheerful, with no hint of the cold calculation I'd witnessed yesterday. I'm so sorry, the doctor's appointment ran long. Are you still able to meet me? Of course. Where are you? I'm actually on my way to your mom's house. I thought I'd help her pack a few more things before Saturday. Paul's eyes met mine across the table. Detective Martinez was frantically writing notes and showing them to Paul. Keep her talking. Find out how far away she is. That's thoughtful of you, Paul said, his voice remarkably steady. How far out are you? Just a few minutes. Is your mom there? I tried calling her earlier but she didn't answer. She's here, Paul said. We were just going through some of Dad's old things. Oh, how sweet. That must be emotional for both of you. I'll be there soon to help. She hung up, and Paul set down his phone with a shaky hand. She's coming here, he told Detective Martinez unnecessarily. Good. We'll be ready for her. She turned to the uniformed officers. I want one of you positioned by the back door, one by the front. Mrs. Patterson, is there another way out of this house? Just the basement door that leads to the side yard. Officer Kim, cover that exit too. She looked at Paul and me. When she arrives, I want you both to act completely normal. Let her come inside. We need her to incriminate herself, so try to get her talking about the nursing home arrangements, the financial documents, anything that shows her true intentions. What if she realizes it's a trap? Paul asked. Then we arrest her immediately. But if we can get her to reveal more about her plan, it'll help us build a stronger case. 10 minutes later, we heard Mia's car in the driveway. Through the front window, I watched her get out, carrying what looked like a small overnight bag. She was smiling, humming to herself as she walked up the path. If I didn't know what I knew, she would have looked like the picture of an caring daughter-in-law coming to help her elderly mother-in-law pack. The doorbell rang. Remember, Detective Martinez whispered from her position behind the kitchen door, act normal. I opened the front door with what I hoped was a welcoming smile. Mia. I wasn't expecting you so early. I know, I'm sorry about the confusion earlier. The doctor's appointment went really well though. She patted her stomach with that same fake maternal glow she'd been perfecting. The baby is developing perfectly. She kissed my cheek, the audacity of it made my skin crawl, and walked into the living room where Paul was waiting. Hi, sweetheart. She said, kissing him too. How did the packing go? We made good progress, Paul replied, and I was amazed at how normal he sounded. Mom found some of Dad's old things in my closet. That's wonderful. I'm sure those memories are precious. She set down her overnight bag and looked around the room. So, Kathy, are you feeling better about the move now? I know it seemed overwhelming yesterday. I'm getting used to the idea, I said carefully. Good. Because I have some great news. She reached into her purse and pulled out what looked like official paperwork. I was able to expedite the financial transfers. Starting tomorrow, all of your accounts will be under Paul's management, which means we can handle everything for you from now on. No more worrying about bills or investments or any of those complicated things. Paul's jaw tightened, but he managed to keep his voice level. That was fast. Well, when you have the right connections, these things can move quickly. She smiled that cold, calculating smile I was beginning to hate. I also spoke with the director at Sunset Manor. They're so excited to meet you, Kathy. They've prepared a lovely room with a view of the garden. How thoughtful, I said. Mia walked over to the mantel, studying the family photos displayed there. You know, it's funny how life works out. Paul was so lonely before he met me, weren't you, honey? And you, Kathy, struggling to maintain this big house all by yourself. But now everything is working out perfectly for everyone. Perfectly, Paul repeated, and there was something in his tone that made Mia look at him more closely. Is everything all right? You seem a little tense. This was it. The moment Detective Martinez had been waiting for. Actually, Paul said, standing up slowly, I have been feeling tense. There are some things that have been bothering me lately. What kinds of things? Mia's voice was still light, but I could see her posture changing, becoming more alert. Well, for instance, I was wondering about your doctor's appointment today. Which clinic did you go to? Dr. Morrison's office. Why? That's interesting, because I called Dr. Morrison's office this afternoon to see if I could reschedule my physical, and they said they don't have any patients named Mia Patterson. The silence that followed was deafening. Mia's face went through a series of expressions. Surprise, then calculation, then something much more dangerous. I don't understand, she said finally. There must have been some kind of mix-up. Maybe, Paul said. Or maybe you weren't at a doctor's appointment at all. Mia's eyes darted around the room, and I could see her mind working, trying to figure out how much we knew, how much we suspected. Paul, you're scaring me. Why are you asking these questions? Because I found something today, Mia. Something that made me realize I don't know you at all. She took a step backward. What did you find? Paul pulled out the DNA test results. This was in your car yesterday. Want to explain why you have a paternity test showing that I'm not the father of your baby? For a moment, Mia just stared at the paper. Then, slowly, that mask of sweetness and concern slipped away completely, replaced by something cold and predatory. You've been snooping, she said, and her voice was entirely different now, harder, more calculating. That's disappointing, Paul. I thought you trusted me. I did trust you. I trusted you completely. I trusted you enough to sign papers putting my mother in a nursing home. I trusted you enough to give you power of attorney over her finances. And you should have kept trusting me, Mia said, her eyes now fixed on the front door like she was calculating distances. Because now things are going to get very unpleasant for everyone involved. That's when Detective Martinez stepped out from behind the kitchen door, her badge held high and her weapon drawn. Maria Santos, you're under arrest for fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit elder abuse. Mia's face went completely white, but she didn't look surprised. She looked like someone whose carefully constructed world had just collapsed, but who had been expecting it to happen eventually. I want a lawyer, she said flatly. You'll have that right, Detective Martinez replied, motioning for the uniformed officers to come forward. But first, you're coming with us. As they handcuffed her, Mia looked directly at me with pure hatred in her eyes. This isn't over, old woman, she said. You think you've won, but you have no idea what you've cost yourself. I know exactly what I've cost myself, I replied. A daughter-in-law who was planning to kill me. As the police led her away, Paul sank into his father's old chair and put his head in his hands. It's over, I said, sitting beside him, but even as I said the words, I had the terrible feeling that Mia's parting threat wasn't just empty anger. Something in her eyes told me that this woman didn't give up easily, and that even from jail, she might still find ways to hurt the people who had crossed her point 3 weeks after Mia's arrest. I stood in my kitchen making coffee for something I hadn't done in months. Paul had been coming by every morning before work, not because he felt obligated, but because he wanted to. We were rebuilding our relationship slowly, carefully, like archaeologists uncovering something precious that had been buried under years of debris. The lawyers called yesterday, Paul said, sitting at the kitchen table where he'd eaten thousands of breakfasts as a child. Mia's agreed to plead guilty to avoid a trial. I set his coffee in front of him, noting how much healthier he looked. The dark circles under his eyes were gone, and he'd gained back some of the weight he'd lost during those terrible months when he'd been torn between his loyalty to me and his love for her. What does that mean for the marriage? Annulled. Officially, legally, it never happened. He took a sip of coffee. They also found evidence of 2 other active marriages under different names. I was never legally her husband at all. I felt a wave of relief so strong it made me dizzy. And the financial damage? Not as bad as it could have been. She hadn't had time to drain everything before we caught her. Most of the money she transferred can be recovered. He looked up at me with eyes that still held traces of the little boy he'd once been. Mom, I'm so sorry. For all of it. For not listening to you, for signing those papers, for choosing her over you. Paul, I said gently, sitting across from him, you don't need to apologize anymore. You were the victim of a professional con artist. She studied you, learned your vulnerabilities, and exploited them. That's not a character flaw, that's what made you a target. But I should have seen through her. Should you? Really? She'd had years of practice manipulating people. She knew exactly how to present herself to seem like everything you were looking for. And she was very good at making you doubt the people who might have warned you. Paul nodded, but I could see he was still struggling with guilt. Detective Martinez told me about the other victims. How many lives she's destroyed. I keep thinking about Robert Chen, the man in Denver who died after she left him. You're not responsible for her past actions, and you're not responsible for preventing her future ones. You're only responsible for your own choices going forward. Speaking of which, Paul said, reaching into his jacket pocket, I have something for you. He pulled out a set of legal documents and placed them on the table between us. I recognized the seal of the county clerk's office. What is this? I'm revoking the power of attorney and any other legal documents I signed. Your finances, your healthcare decisions, everything goes back to being your choice and yours alone. I looked at the papers, then at my son. Paul, I'm 66 years old. There may come a time when I do need help managing things. And when that time comes, if it comes, we'll discuss it. Together. As equals. No more decisions made about you without you being part of the conversation. I felt tears prick at my eyes. Thank you. There's something else. He hesitated, then continued. I know you'd never ask, but I want you to know, you don't ever have to worry about money again. The business has been doing really well, and I've set up an account that will cover any expenses you have for the rest of your life. Not because I feel guilty, but because I love you and I want you to feel secure. Paul, I know you don't need it. You've proven you can take care of yourself better than anyone I've ever known. But I want to do this. Please let me. I nodded, too emotional to speak. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, drinking our coffee and watching the morning sun stream through the kitchen windows. It was Paul who spoke first. I've been thinking about Dad lately. About what he would have said about all this. What do you think he would have said? That he was proud of you for fighting for me, even when I didn't want to be fought for. Paul smiled sadly. He always said you were the strongest person he knew. I never really understood what he meant until now. Your father would have been proud of you too, I said. For having the courage to face the truth when it was shown to you, even when it was painful. I hope so. Paul glanced at his watch. I should get to work soon, but there's one more thing I wanted to discuss with you. What's that? The house. It's too big for just you, and maintaining it has to be expensive. Have you thought about what you want to do long term? My first instinct was defensiveness. This was my home, the place where I'd raised him, where every corner held memories. But then I really considered the question. The house was large, and keeping up with the yard work and maintenance was becoming more challenging. More importantly, many of my happiest memories here were tied to Paul's childhood, and he was grown now, building his own life. I've been thinking about that too, I admitted. Maybe it is time for a change. What kind of change? I'd been turning an idea over in my mind for the past few weeks, but I hadn't dared voice it out loud until now. There's a little cottage for sale about 10 minutes from here. 2 bedrooms, a small garden, walking distance to the library and the park. I drove by it yesterday, and it felt peaceful. Paul smiled. That sounds perfect for you. Want me to look into it? Actually, I already made an offer. The realtor called this morning, it was accepted. Mom! Paul laughed, and it was the first completely joyful sound I'd heard from him in months. You didn't waste any time. I'm 66 years old, Paul. I don't have time to waste. After Paul left for work, I walked through the house slowly, seeing it with new eyes. In a few weeks, this would no longer be my home. But for the first time, that thought didn't fill me with sadness. It filled me with anticipation. The cottage I'd bought was small but bright, with large windows that faced east toward the sunrise. It had a tiny kitchen that would be perfect for cooking for one, a cozy living room with a fireplace, and a garden just big enough for the vegetables and flowers I'd always wanted to grow but never had time for. Most importantly, it was mine. Chosen by me, paid for with my own money, free from the manipulation and interference of people who saw me as either a burden or a resource to be exploited. That afternoon, I got a call from Detective Martinez. Mrs. Patterson, I wanted to update you on the case. Maria Santos, or whatever her real name is, will be sentenced next week. With her plea agreement and the evidence from multiple jurisdictions, she's looking at 15 to 20 years. Will she be able to hurt anyone else when she gets out? She'll be in her 50s by then, and her methods depend on appearing young and vulnerable. Plus, her fingerprints and DNA are now in every database in the country. If she tries this again, we'll catch her much faster. After hanging up, I realized I felt no satisfaction at Mia's fate, no sense of revenge or vindication. I felt something much more valuable, freedom from fear. For the first time in months, I could sleep through the night without wondering what she might do next. 2 days later, Paul helped me start packing for the move. We worked side by side, sorting through decades of accumulated possessions, deciding what to keep, what to donate, what to throw away. Look at this, Paul said, pulling a photo album from a box in the closet. I haven't seen these pictures in years. We sat on the floor, flipping through pages of memories. Paul as a baby, taking his first steps. Paul on his first day of school, gap-toothed and grinning. Paul at his high school graduation, trying to look grown up in his cap and gown. I was thinking, Paul said as we reached the more recent photos, we should start making new memories. Better ones. What did you have in mind? Well, there's this photography class at the community center. I thought maybe we could take it together. And there's a book club at the library that meets every Tuesday. You always loved reading. I looked at my son, this man who'd been manipulated into almost destroying our relationship, who'd found the strength to face the truth and fight his way back to me, and felt my heart swell with pride and love. I'd like that very much. A month later, I stood in the garden of my new cottage, planting tomatoes in the rich, dark soil. The morning sun warmed my face, and I could hear birds singing in the oak tree that shaded the back corner of the yard. Paul was coming for dinner tonight, not out of obligation, but because he wanted to see how the tomatoes were growing. My phone rang, and I saw Detective Martinez's name on the screen. Mrs. Patterson, I have some news you should know about. We've been contacted by authorities in Oregon and Florida. Apparently, Maria Santos had been corresponding with other con artists while she was awaiting trial. They're looking into whether she was part of a larger network. Does that affect Paul or me? No, you're both completely safe. But it means her case is helping us identify and stop other people who prey on vulnerable families. In a way, what you did, fighting back, gathering evidence, refusing to be intimidated, it's protecting other families from going through what you went through. After she hung up, I stood among my tomato plants, thinking about that. Mia had seen me as a weak old woman who could be easily discarded. She'd underestimated the fierce protective instinct of a mother, and the strength that comes from a lifetime of overcoming challenges. But more than that, she'd underestimated something fundamental about love and family. She'd thought she could manipulate Paul by exploiting his kindness, his desire to be needed, his fear of being alone. What she hadn't understood was that real love, the kind Paul and I shared, doesn't break under pressure. It bends, it stretches, sometimes it even appears to break completely. But at its core, it endures. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, I finished planting my tomatoes and stepped back to admire my work. In a few months, these small plants would produce fruit. In a few years, this garden would be lush and productive. I had time to watch it grow, time to enjoy the home I'd chosen for myself, time to rebuild my relationship with Paul on a foundation of mutual respect and genuine affection. Mia had tried to steal my future, but she'd failed completely. Instead, she'd given me something I hadn't expected, the knowledge that I was strong enough to fight for what mattered, smart enough to outmaneuver someone who underestimated me, and deserving of a life lived on my own terms. I was 66 years old, and I was free. And that freedom, hard won and honestly earned, was more precious than anything she could have taken from me.